The sky was calm above the desert world of Zara. Thin clouds stretched like silver lines, and the twin suns gave the sands a golden glow. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning when no one expected trouble. Farmers worked near the edge of the dunes, and children carried water jars toward the wells. Then, without warning, the sky split with fire. A starship came tearing through the upper atmosphere. It spun as flames wrapped around its hull. Pieces of metal broke off and scattered across the desert like falling stars. The ground shook as the ship roared overhead, its engines screaming. The villagers looked up in shock. Many ran for cover. Others stood frozen, staring at the doomed craft. Everyone knew a crash of that size left no survivors. The ship slammed into the sands outside the village with a deafening explosion. A cloud of dust rose high into the sky, darkening the light of the suns. The ground quaked, and shock waves knocked people off their feet. When the dust settled, the wreck lay broken and smoking, half buried in the golden dunes. A group of villagers rushed toward the site. They carried ropes, water, and lanterns. Among them was a human medic named Tomasz. Unlike the others, he did not shout or panic. His eyes stayed calm, scanning the wreck as he walked with quick, steady steps. The closer they came, the clearer the destruction appeared. The ship's nose was buried deep in the sand. One wing was twisted and torn away. Fires burned inside the cracks of the broken hull. Sparks shot into the air, and metal groaned as if the wreck itself was alive with pain. "Stay back," shouted one villager. "The ship will explode." But Tomasz stepped forward. "If anyone lives, every moment matters." His voice was firm, not loud, yet enough to silence the fear around him. They pulled aside a piece of smoking metal. Beneath it lay a young alien pilot. Her name was Nira. Her skin was pale silver, and her eyes faintly glowed blue even as she fought to stay awake. Blood streaked her face, and her breathing was weak. Both of her legs lay twisted at unnatural angles, pinned under broken pieces of the cockpit. The villagers gasped. "She is finished," one whispered. "No one survives such breaks," said another. "Her kind cannot heal from this. She cannot be saved. We should give her peace." But Tomasz ignored them. He dropped to his knees beside Nira and touched her wrist. A faint pulse beat there. He leaned close and spoke softly, "You are alive. Stay with me." Nira opened her eyes halfway. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Do not speak," Tomasz said. "Save your strength." With the help of two villagers, Tomasz lifted the heavy metal pieces from her legs. Every motion made Nira cry out in pain, though her voice was little more than a whisper. When her legs were freed, the villagers stepped back. They shook their heads in sorrow. "Her bones are shattered," said one elder. "Even if she lives, she will never walk again." Tomasz did not answer. He placed his hands on her legs, feeling carefully where the bones had broken. His face was steady, but inside he knew the truth. The damage was terrible. In most cases, the body would give up. But still, he saw something in her eyes, a will that had not yet gone out. He looked at the others. "Bring water. Bring cloth. Bring wood. Do not argue. Move quickly." The villagers hesitated. Some wanted to leave her, believing it hopeless. But Tomasz's voice carried weight. He was human, and humans had earned a strange reputation across the galaxy. They were seen as fragile in body but fierce in spirit. When a human said, "It can be done," others often followed. Soon the supplies arrived. Tomash washed Nira's wounds with cool water, clearing the blood and sand. He tore cloth into strips for bandages. Then he searched the wreckage for strong pieces of metal and wood. With these, he began to build splints. His hands moved with skill, but also with care, as if every touch meant life or death. The villagers gathered in a circle, whispering. "Why waste time?" said one. "She is doomed." "Humans do not know when to stop," said another. "Maybe he sees what we cannot." Hours passed. Tomash worked without rest. He wrapped Nira's legs, set the bones in place, and fixed the splints tight. He gave her water, pressing it gently to her lips. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving his. For the first time since the crash, a spark of hope lit inside her. When the sun began to set, Tomash finally leaned back. Sweat covered his forehead, and his hands were stained with dust and blood. But his voice was calm when he spoke. "She will live." The villagers stared at him. Some laughed bitterly, others shook their heads. But one elder, the oldest in the village, stepped forward. His eyes studied Tomash carefully. "You speak with such certainty," the elder said. "But her body is broken." Tomash met his gaze. "Broken does not mean lost. She breathes, she drinks, her heart still fights. As long as there is breath, I will not give up." The elder was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. That night, Nero lay on a bed of soft cloth inside a small tent. A fire burned outside, keeping the desert chill away. The villagers returned to their homes, whispering that the human was foolish. But Tomash stayed by her side. He checked her breathing, adjusted the bandages, and watched her eyes. At one point, Nira tried to speak. Her voice was faint. "Why, try?" Tomash answered softly, "Because you are alive. That is reason enough." She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the crash, she slept. Tomash looked at the stars above the desert. Many believed she was doomed. Many believed his efforts were wasted. But inside, he felt something different. He knew the fight had only begun. The desert night passed slowly, and by the time the twin suns rose again, the villagers had gathered once more near the tent where Nira rested. Many expected to find her gone, her body given to the sands. But when Tomash stepped outside, he spoke calmly. "She lives. She needs food and water." The villagers exchanged doubtful looks. None wished to argue openly, but their whispers carried across the camp. "She should not still breathe. The human wastes his time. It is only a matter of days before her body gives in." Tomash heard their words, but he did not allow them to touch his heart. He returned to Nira's side. Her eyes were open now, though heavy with pain. She tried to sit up, but the effort sent sharp tremors through her body. "You must rest," Tomash said, guiding her gently back onto the cloth bedding. "Your legs will not hold you yet." Her voice was weak, but clear enough to ask, "Why do you stay?" He looked at her for a moment, then answered, "Because no one else will. And because you are not finished with life." Her gaze lingered on him. Her kind, the Zarans, were known for their strength in the skies, but when their bodies broke, few returned from such wounds. She had already accepted that her last moments would be spent in pain. Yet here was this human, speaking as though her survival was not just possible, but certain. Outside the tent, the villagers watched. Some were uneasy. Others grew curious. It was rare to see a human at work in their village. Though Tomash had lived among them for months, offering his skills as a medic in exchange for food and shelter. Many still saw him as strange. Humans were small compared to most species, yet they carried themselves with a stubborn pride that could not be measured in size. That day Tomasz spent long hours tending to Nira. He checked the splints he had built from wood and metal, adjusting them so her legs remained straight. He cooled her forehead with damp cloths, brought her water in small sips, and fed her broth made from desert herbs. Every step was careful, every motion steady. He did not rush, and he did not leave her side. The villagers began to notice this patience. At one point, the elder of the village entered the tent. He stood quietly for a while, watching the human's hands move. "Why do you believe she will live?" the elder finally asked. Tomasz tied the last knot on a fresh bandage before answering. "Because she fights. Her body is broken, yes. But her eyes still hold fire. As long as that fire burns, she has a chance." The elder frowned. "You speak of spirit. Spirit cannot heal bones." "Perhaps not," Tomasz said. "But spirit keeps the body alive long enough for the bones to heal." The elder left without another word. Yet his expression had changed, softened by something he had seen in the human's calm manner. As days passed, Nira's condition slowly improved. She could drink more water and even manage a few bites of solid food. The pain in her legs remained, sharp and heavy, but she no longer drifted on the edge of unconsciousness. Still, the villagers doubted. Some began to say Tomasz was cruel, keeping her alive only to suffer longer. Others, though, began to grow curious about his methods. A few younger ones came to watch as he worked, asking quiet questions. "How do you know where to place the splints?" one asked. "I listen to the body," Tomasz replied. "It tells me what is broken, what must be held still, and what must move. Bones can grow again, but only if we give them the chance." Another asked, "And if they do not grow?" Tomasz looked at Nira, who was listening as well. "Then we find another way. A way to move forward." Nira spoke softly. "You speak as if nothing is impossible." He gave her a small smile. "Not impossible. Only difficult." Her lips curved faintly, the shadow of a smile in return. It was the first time since the crash that hope touched her face. One evening, as the sun sank low, Tomasz left the tent for a short walk. He needed water from the well. When he returned, he found several villagers gathered around Nira. They were speaking to her, telling her to accept peace and let go. "She cannot heal," one said firmly. "It is better to sleep and not wake again." Nira's eyes lowered. She did not answer. Before she could, Tomasz stepped inside. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Enough. Do not bring such words here." The villagers turned. "We speak truth. You give her false hope." "Hope is never false," Tomasz said. "Without it, nothing grows. Without it, no one fights to live." The villagers fell silent. One by one, they left the tent, leaving only Tomasz and Nira. Her eyes met his. "Why do you argue for me?" "Because you are worth the fight," he answered simply. She turned her gaze to the ceiling of the tent. For the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. The following morning, Tomasz began to teach her how to breathe through the pain. He guided her to take slow, steady breaths whenever the throbbing in her legs became too sharp. It was a simple method, but it helped her endure. Each day he checked her wounds, cleaned them, and spoke to her of small things. Stories of other villages, stories of human history, stories of survival against the odds. Nero listened, finding strength in his words. And though the villagers still doubted, they could not deny what their eyes saw. The young pilot who should have been lost was still alive. And she was not only alive, but slowly growing stronger under the care of the human medic. By the end of the second week, whispers began to change. Perhaps the human is not so foolish. Perhaps she truly will live. Perhaps there is something in his way that we do not yet understand. For Nira, every day remained a struggle, yet every day also carried a new spark of light. She had been ready to surrender her life to the sands, but now, with Tomasz beside her, she began to believe she could rise again. And in that belief, the impossible began to feel possible. The days passed slowly in the desert village. Every morning the twin suns rose and painted the sands in gold, and every evening they sank, leaving long shadows across the dunes. The desert lived by its own rhythm, but inside the small tent where Nero lay, time felt different. It moved with the rhythm of her breaths, her pain, and the careful work of Tomasz, the human medic. Though her life had been saved from the crash, the villagers still doubted. They believed her survival was only temporary. Whenever they passed the tent, their whispers followed like dry winds. She is still here, but not for long. The human keeps her tied to suffering. Better to let the desert take her than to hope for what cannot be. Tomasz heard these whispers each day, yet he kept working. He refused to let doubt take root. He spoke little to the villagers, saving his words and strength for Nira. That morning, Nira woke with a sharp cry. Pain cut through her legs as if fire burned inside the bones. Tomasz was already beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Breathe slowly," he said. "In and out. Do not fight the pain. Let it pass through you." She tried to follow his words. Her breaths came uneven at first, then steadier as his calm voice guided her. When at last the worst of the pain faded, she opened her eyes. "Why do you believe I can survive this?" she asked weakly. Tomasz looked at her, his face serious. "Because I have seen worse. And because you have not given up." Her lips tightened. "My people would say I am already broken. A pilot who cannot fly is nothing." "Then they are wrong," Tomasz answered without hesitation. "You are more than your wings. You are still alive. That is enough to fight for." She was silent, but his words sank deep into her thoughts. Later that day, a small group of villagers entered the tent. Among them was Raul, a strong hunter with broad shoulders. He looked at Nira, then at Tomasz. "This is useless," Raul said firmly. "She will never walk again. Why do you waste food and water on her?" Tomasz's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "Because life is worth the effort." Raul shook his head. "Your human stubbornness blinds you. Our healers say such wounds cannot mend. The Zarans are not like humans. When our bones shatter, they do not grow again." "Then we will prove them wrong," Tomasz said. The hunter stepped closer, his voice sharp. "You give her false hope. You make her believe she can rise, but she cannot. When she fails, her spirit will break." Before Tomasz could reply, Nira spoke. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air. "Better false hope than none at all." The villagers fell silent. They looked at her, surprised she had the strength to speak. Then they turned and left, muttering among themselves. Tomasz looked at her with quiet respect. "You are stronger than they think." She gave him a faint smile, though pain still clouded her eyes. That evening, Tomasz checked her splints again. He adjusted the bindings and cleaned the wounds. His hands moved carefully, but his mind carried the weight of the villagers' doubt. He knew the road ahead would be long and hard. He knew her legs might never fully heal as they once were. But he also knew that giving up meant certain death. When the night grew quiet, Nira spoke again. "Do you ever doubt yourself, Tomasz?" He paused, then answered honestly. "Yes. Many times. But doubt does not stop me. I keep moving, even with doubt on my shoulders." She looked at him for a long moment. "I wish I had that strength." "You do," he said. "It is in you already. You survived the crash when no one else believed you could. That is proof." His words gave her a strange warmth. For the first time, she began to wonder if he truly saw something in her that she had never seen in herself. The following days tested both of them. The desert winds grew stronger, carrying sand into the village. The air inside the tent became heavy and hot. Nira's pain returned in waves, and more than once she nearly fainted from exhaustion. Each time Tomasz was there, guiding her through the storm of pain, cooling her forehead, giving her sips of water. The villagers continued their whispers. Some said Tomasz was wasting his strength. Others said perhaps he had gone mad, refusing to accept the truth. But a few began to watch more closely. They saw how Nira's eyes no longer looked as empty as before. They saw how her voice grew a little stronger each day. One evening, the elder of the village came again. He sat near Tomasz and Nira, his eyes filled with thought. "You do not rest," the elder said to Tomasz. "Why do you carry this burden alone?" "Because it is my choice," Tomasz answered. The elder studied him. "You remind me of the desert itself. Harsh, endless, and refusing to bow to time." Tomasz smiled faintly. "I am only a man who will not give up." The elder turned to Nira. "And you, child? Do you wish to live, even with the pain?" Nira's eyes met his, steady despite her weakness. "Yes. I wish to live." The elder nodded slowly. "Then perhaps there is more to this human way than we thought." From that night forward, the elder sent food and water to the tent without question. His gesture silenced some of the whispers, though doubt still lingered. As the third week came, a change began to show. Nira could lift herself slightly with her arms. Her voice no longer trembled with every word. Though her legs were still bound in splints, her spirit grew stronger. One afternoon, as Tomasz helped her drink, she looked at him and said, "When I fell from the sky, I thought my story was ending. Now I wonder if it is only beginning." Tomasz's eyes softened. "It is only beginning." And in that moment, even with the pain and the doubt surrounding them, hope grew brighter in the desert tent. The desert sun rose again, spreading light across the endless dunes. Heat shimmered on the horizon, and the village slowly began its day. But inside the small tent at the edge of the settlement, a different struggle was taking place. Nira lay on her bedding, her face pale but her eyes open. The splints that Tomasz had built still held her legs straight, but the pain never left her. It returned in waves, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, but always present. That morning Tomasz knelt beside her with a calm expression. He carried a small bowl of herbs crushed into paste. "Today will be hard," he said. "We must reset the bones. If they are not aligned, they will heal twisted." Nira's breath caught. "Reset?" "Yes," he said gently. "It will hurt, but it must be done. If we leave them as they are, you will never walk again." Her fingers clenched the cloth beneath her. Fear showed in her eyes, but also something else, a quiet trust. She nodded once. Do what you must. Tomasz prepared carefully. He cleaned his hands, then spread the herb paste along her legs. The mixture was cool, numbing the skin slightly, though it could not touch the pain deep inside the bones. He spoke softly as he worked, keeping her focused on his voice. Breathe with me. In and out. Think of the sky above the desert. Wide and endless. Think of flight. She closed her eyes, trying to follow his words. Then he began. His hands were steady but strong as he moved the broken bones into place. The sound of grinding bone filled the tent. Nira cried out, her voice sharp with pain, but Tomasz did not stop. He held her firmly, guiding the bones back to their natural line. Sweat covered his forehead, but his eyes never left his work. Stay with me, he said firmly. Do not give up now. Her nails dug into the bedding, her body trembling. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she forced herself to keep breathing. Each breath came with effort, but she clung to his voice, to the certainty in his tone. At last, after long minutes that felt like hours, Tomasz finished. He bound her legs again with fresh cloth and tightened the splints. Then he sat back, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. It is done, he said softly. Nira's face was pale, her body weak from the ordeal. Yet when she opened her eyes, there was a spark of relief. The worst had passed. You did not leave me, she whispered. I never will, Tomasz said. That day, he stayed by her side without rest. He gave her water in small sips, cooled her face with damp cloths, and told her simple stories to keep her mind from the pain. He spoke of human villages on green worlds, of rivers that ran for miles, of forests where the wind sang through the leaves. You humans live in strange places, Nira said weakly, trying to smile. We survive wherever we must, he answered. Outside the tent, the villagers listened. Some shook their heads, saying the human was cruel for putting her through such pain. But others began to see something different. They saw Nira endure what should have broken her spirit. They saw Tomasz's patience, his refusal to leave her even for a moment. And slowly, their whispers began to change. The following days were difficult. The resetting of her bones left Nira weaker, and the pain lingered. But she endured. Each day Tomasz guided her through simple exercises, moving her arms, helping her sit up for short moments, teaching her to breathe through the pain. Why must I do this? She asked one morning, exhausted after trying to lift herself. Because if you do nothing, your body will fade, he explained. Strength returns only if we call for it. You must fight for every breath, every movement. She looked at him, her voice faint. You make it sound like war. It is war, he said. A war against despair. And you are winning. His words gave her courage. Even when she trembled, even when she thought she could not bear another moment, she remembered his voice. One evening, the elder visited again. He watched as Tomasz helped Nira sit upright, supporting her back with careful hands. She was weak, but her eyes held light. The elder spoke softly. You suffer much, child. Why do you endure it? Nira's answer was simple. Because he believes I can. The elder turned to Tomasz. Your faith is heavy. What if she fails? Then she fails trying, Tomasz replied. That is better than surrender. The elder nodded slowly, as though these words had given him something to think about. That night, after the elder left, Nero looked at Tomasz with quiet wonder. You risk so much for me. Why? He met her gaze calmly. Because life is worth risk. And because you remind me of something humans carry in their hearts. What is that? She asked. Hope, he said. She thought of this long after he spoke. As the days passed, Nero began to grow stronger. She could lift herself without help for brief moments. She could drink and eat without trembling hands. The pain remained, but she no longer let it control her. The villagers noticed. Some began to visit, bringing food and fresh cloth. A few even asked Tomasz to teach them his ways. He showed them simple skills: how to clean wounds, how to bind injuries, how to listen to the body. But still, doubt remained in many hearts. Her legs are still broken, they whispered. Even if she lives, she will never walk again. Tomasz never answered these whispers. Instead, he continued the painful work. Each day he checked the splints, adjusted the bindings, and guided Nero through slow movements. Each day he reminded her to fight, to breathe, to believe. One night, as the stars spread across the desert sky, Nero whispered to him, "When I fell, I thought the desert would take me. Now I think perhaps I was meant to fall here, where a human would not let me die." Tomasz smiled faintly. Perhaps so. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the endless sands, the painful work began to show its first reward, not in her legs, but in her spirit. The desert village had grown used to the sight of Tomasz moving in and out of the small tent where Nero rested. For weeks, the human medic worked with quiet patience, refusing to leave her side for long. The villagers no longer mocked him openly, but many still doubted. They believed her survival was a strange miracle, nothing more. Walking again was beyond their imagination. But Tomasz thought differently. He had watched her strength return little by little. Her voice no longer trembled as before. Her eyes no longer looked at the ground with despair. She had learned to sit up without his hands holding her steady. These were small victories, but to Tomasz they were signs of something greater. That morning, the desert air was cool, and a soft wind carried the scent of dry herbs from the village fires. Tomasz entered the tent carrying 2 wooden sticks he had shaped carefully during the night. He placed them beside Nero's bed. "What are those?" she asked, her silver eyes curious. "Supports," Tomasz answered. "Today, you will try to stand." Her face froze with shock. "Stand? I cannot. My legs are still broken." "They are mending," he said firmly. "If you wait too long, your body will forget how to carry you. We must remind it." Fear flickered across her face. She looked at her splinted legs, then at him. "What if I fall?" "Then I will catch you," Tomasz said simply. For a long moment, silence filled the tent. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Very well. I will try." With careful hands, Tomasz helped her sit up fully. He guided her legs to the ground, the splints still bound tight around them. The moment her feet touched the earth, pain surged through her body, sharp and hot. She gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the cloth of her bedding. "Breathe," Tomasz reminded her. "Slow and steady. The pain is real, but it is not the end." She nodded, forcing air into her lungs. He placed the wooden supports into her hands. They felt heavy and strange, but their weight also gave her something to lean on. "Now," Tomasz said. "I will lift you. Do not fear. Let your arms take some of the weight." He moved beside her, his arm firm under her shoulder. Slowly, with effort, He pulled her upward. Her legs trembled, her body shook, and for a moment she thought she would collapse. But the supports held, and so did his steady hand. The villagers outside heard a cry. They turned toward the tent, expecting tragedy. But when the flap opened, they saw something they could hardly believe. Nero was standing. Her legs were weak, bent beneath the weight of the splints, but they held. Her arms pressed down hard on the wooden supports, her body leaning against Tomasz, yet she was on her feet. Gasps filled the air. Children pointed. Elders stared in disbelief. "She stands," one whispered. "Impossible," said another. "No one with such wounds has ever risen." Tomasz ignored their words. His eyes stayed on Nira. "Take one step," he said softly. Her heart pounded. Her breath came quick. She looked at the ground, then at him. "I cannot." "Yes, you can," he said. "One step. That is all." She closed her eyes, drew in a long breath, and shifted her weight forward. Her left foot dragged slightly, then touched the sand in front of her. The motion sent fire through her legs, but she did not fall. The villagers gasped again. "One step," Tomasz said with a faint smile. "Now another." She tried again. Her right foot moved, unsteady but true. She nearly stumbled, but Tomasz steadied her. And so, for the first time since the crash, Nero walked. It was only a few steps, each one filled with pain and effort, but the sight was enough to silence the village. Where they had seen only doom, the human had seen possibility. When she finally collapsed back onto the bedding, sweat covered her forehead and tears ran down her face. But her lips curved into a smile. "I stood," she whispered. "You walked," Tomasz corrected gently. "Remember this moment. It is the beginning." The villagers spoke of nothing else that day. Some still said it was madness, that she would never recover fully. But others began to wonder if the human was right. Perhaps his way of refusing to surrender was stronger than their own belief in fate. That evening, as the sun sank behind the dunes, Nero looked at Tomasz. "When I took that step, I felt alive again. For weeks I was only breathing. Today I lived. That is why we fight," he said. She studied him quietly, then asked, "Do you ever tire of carrying hope for others?" "Every day," he admitted. "But I never put it down." Her eyes softened. "Then perhaps I will learn to carry it with you." From that day forward, their work grew harder. Each morning Tomasz guided her outside the tent to try a few steps. Each evening she returned, exhausted but stronger. The pain never left, yet she learned to face it without fear. The villagers began to gather to watch. Children clapped whenever she took a step. Hunters nodded with respect, though they had once mocked her chances. Even the elder came often, his eyes filled with thought. One afternoon, after watching her walk several paces, the elder said quietly, "The human teaches us more than medicine. He teaches us courage." Nira heard this and felt her chest warm with pride. She had thought herself broken, yet now she was becoming a sign of hope, not only for herself but for others. That night, lying on her bedding, she whispered, "Tomasz, today I took 5 steps." He smiled. "Tomorrow, you will take 6." And though her body ached, she closed her eyes with a heart lighter than it had been since the crash. In the silence of the desert, under the endless stars, the sound of her first steps echoed like a promise. The desert mornings were bright and harsh, yet within the small tent at the edge of the village, life had changed. Nira's legs, though still weak, were no longer only a source of pain. With the care and guidance of Tomasz, she was learning to move with purpose. Each day, Tomasz helped her rise from her bedding, guiding her hands to hold the wooden supports he had made. Her first steps had been slow and uncertain, but now, she could walk longer distances across the tent, her movements growing more confident with each attempt. Pain still ran through her legs like fire, but she faced it with quiet determination. "You are ready for the open air," Tomasz said one morning. "Today, we leave the tent." Nira's eyes widened. "Outside. The desert. My legs cannot hold me there." "They can," he said. "We take it slowly. One step at a time, just like before." The villagers gathered to watch. Some were curious, some doubtful, but all were silent. The sight of her attempting to walk outside for the first time since the crash was something they had never imagined. Tomasz helped her to stand, holding her tightly by the shoulder. The wooden supports pressed into her hands, steadying her balance. She took a cautious step onto the sand. Her heart raced, and pain shot through her legs, but she did not fall. Again, Tomasz said softly. One step after another. She took another step, then another, her legs trembling, her body swaying. But she moved forward. The villagers gasped in unison. Some had expected collapse, some had expected failure. But now they saw a miracle of a different kind, a human teaching life, and an alien learning to rise. By noon, Nira could walk across a short stretch of sand with Tomasz beside her. She stumbled several times, but each time he steadied her. Sweat soaked their clothes, but neither of them gave up. The elder approached them quietly. "I did not believe it possible," he said. "But here she walks. She survives." Tomasz nodded, wiping his brow. "She walks because she chooses to." The elder studied Nira. "Your courage is greater than the pain," he said. Nira smiled faintly. "It is easier when someone believes in you." The villagers had begun to understand that Tomasz's presence was not merely about medicine. It was about hope, determination, and the refusal to give in. Slowly, the whispers of doubt were replaced by quiet admiration. As the days passed, Nira's confidence grew. Tomasz guided her through longer walks, teaching her to place her weight evenly, to breathe steadily, and to move with patience. At first, she needed constant support, but by the end of the week, she could take steps without his hands holding her. The wooden supports still helped, but she relied on them less and less. One evening, as the sun sank behind the distant dunes, Nira walked to the edge of the village alone. The sand burned beneath her feet, yet she did not falter. Her legs shook, but she stood tall. She looked back at Tomasz, who watched with pride. "You have done it," he said softly. "I have done it," she corrected. He smiled. "Together, then." The villagers gathered nearby, whispering in awe. Some had followed her growth with skepticism, but now their doubts were gone. They saw her rise from the brink of despair, guided by the quiet persistence of a human who refused to surrender. Over the next few days, Tomasz introduced small challenges. Nira practiced climbing gentle slopes, stepping over low dunes, and walking along uneven paths. Each new step brought pain, but also strength. She learned to rely on her body, to trust her legs again. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult climb, she sat on a flat rock, breathing heavily. "I did not think I could do this," she said, her silver eyes shining. "You thought you could not," Tomasz said, "but now you see that you can." Her voice was soft, filled with wonder. It feels as if I am learning to live again. You are, Tomasz replied. Every step you take is a victory. Every time you rise, you show the world your strength. The elder, who had watched her silently, stepped forward. You are teaching all of us, he said. Not just her. You show us that life is never finished, no matter how broken it seems. Nira turned to him, grateful. I could not have done it without him, she said. The elder nodded, understanding the depth of what she meant. Tomasz had not only saved her body, he had restored her hope. Days turned into weeks. Nira walked further each day, and her legs grew stronger. She could stand without the wooden supports for short periods, and she began to test her balance on her own. Pain was still a companion, but she no longer feared it. She had learned that each step mattered, that each breath mattered, and that the human beside her would never allow her to give up. One morning, she stood at the top of a small dune, looking over the village. The golden sands stretched endlessly, but for the first time, she felt powerful rather than broken. Tomasz approached, his face calm, yet his eyes full of pride. You did this, he said. Look at how far you have come. Nira smiled. I did it because you believed I could. And because I chose to rise. He nodded. Now you can show the others what hope looks like. That afternoon, she walked into the village without support, steady and confident. Children ran to watch her, and even the hunters, who had once doubted, nodded respectfully. She moved past the tents and the fire pits, her silver eyes bright, and her steps sure. The villagers no longer whispered of doom. They whispered of courage, of strength, and of the human who refused to give up. At night, Nira sat beside Tomasz by the fire, looking at the stars that stretched endlessly across the desert sky. I have never felt so alive, she said quietly. You are alive, Tomasz said. And soon, you will walk even farther. Soon, you will run. She laughed softly, a sound she had not made in months. Running feels impossible. Nothing is impossible, he said simply. Not for you, not when you refuse to give up. The desert wind moved gently across them, carrying the scent of sand and fire. In that quiet moment, both of them knew that what had begun with a crash, a broken body, and pain had transformed into life, strength, and hope. Nira's journey was far from finished, but she had taken the greatest step, the step of trusting herself, trusting the human who had saved her, and walking again. The desert village had changed since the day Nira's starship fell from the sky. Where once there was doubt and fear, there was now quiet admiration and respect. The villagers no longer spoke of doom or the inevitability of failure. Instead, they watched her progress and whispered of courage, determination, and life restored. Nira had grown stronger with each passing day. Her legs, once twisted and broken, now held her body firmly. Pain still came in waves, but she had learned to move with patience and purpose. Each step she took was a victory, each movement a testament to her determination and the human who had guided her. Tomasz stood beside her as she practiced walking across the dunes. The wind carried grains of sand over the golden surface, and the twin suns reflected off her silver skin. She took long, steady steps, her balance improving, her confidence visible in every movement. You have come far, Tomasz said, his voice calm and warm. Nira looked at him, her eyes shining. I could not have done this without you. You believed in me when no one else did. He shook his head gently. I only guided you. The courage was always yours. The villagers watched quietly from a distance. Children ran alongside her, trying to mimic her steps, laughing as they learned to balance in the soft sand. Even the hunters, who had once doubted her survival, now looked on with quiet pride. One of the elders approached Tomasz, his face thoughtful. "You have done more than heal her body," he said softly. "You have given her life again. And you have taught us all something about hope." Tomasz nodded. "Hope is not easy. It takes patience, and sometimes it takes courage to carry it for someone else. But it is never wasted." Nira stopped walking and turned to the elder. "I was ready to give up. I thought my story ended the day my ship crashed. But he showed me that life is always worth fighting for." The elder studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You remind us that even when all seems lost, determination and belief can make the impossible possible." The villagers began to gather closer, forming a circle around Nira and Tomasz. They wanted to see her walk, to witness the proof of survival and courage. Some carried water and food, offering support, while others simply watched in silence. The air was filled with quiet reverence. Tomasz guided Nira to the center of the circle. "Walk for them," he said softly. "Show them what can happen when we refuse to give up." Nira took a deep breath. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the soft sand beneath her feet. Her legs shook slightly, but her heart was strong. One careful step led to another. The villagers gasped with each motion, seeing the alien pilot who had been broken rise and move with determination. By the time she reached the far side of the circle, she was breathing heavily, but she stood tall. Her eyes met Tomasz's, and they shared a quiet moment of pride and understanding. "You have inspired more than me," he said. "You have inspired them as well." Nero looked at the villagers. Some were smiling, some had tears in their eyes. They saw not only her strength but also the human's persistence, and they understood something important. Life was not only about survival. It was about refusing to surrender, about carrying hope even when the odds seemed impossible. That evening, the village gathered around a fire. Nira sat beside Tomasz, her legs stretched out and her body relaxed. Children ran to her, asking questions, and elders told stories of the day she first stood. She answered them patiently, sharing her journey and the lessons she had learned. "I was ready to give up," she said quietly. "I thought my body could not heal, and I thought I was alone. But Tomasz never left. He showed me that life is always worth fighting for. And because of that, I stand today." The villagers listened in silence. Some had once doubted, but now their hearts were filled with hope. They realized that even when circumstances seemed hopeless, courage and belief could change everything. Tomasz looked at her with quiet pride. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Do not forget that." Nira smiled. "I will not. And I will remember the lesson you taught me. Hope is never wasted, and life is never over until we decide to stop fighting." The elder stood and addressed the village. "Let this be a lesson to all of us," he said. "Even when all seems lost, do not give up. Strength comes not only from the body but from the spirit, and courage can inspire others to rise. Today, we have witnessed a miracle, but it is more than that. It is a lesson of hope." The villagers nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes. They had seen death, pain, and despair, but they had also seen recovery, determination, and the triumph of spirit. Nira's survival was a story that would be told for generations, not only because of the human who healed her but also because of the courage she showed in refusing to surrender. Over the following days, Nira began to move more freely. She walked without support across the village, climbed small dunes, and even ran short distances with careful steps. Her legs were not yet fully healed, but her spirit had grown stronger than anyone could have imagined. Children followed her, eager to learn from her example. The villagers began to share stories of human courage, telling how Tomasz refused to give up even when others believed she was doomed. The lesson spread across the village: survival was possible when one carried hope, determination, and the courage to act. One evening, as the sun set over the dunes, Nira and Tomasz stood at the edge of the village. The wind carried the scent of sand and fire, and the sky was painted with colors of gold, red, and violet. "I have learned much from you," Nira said quietly. "And I have learned from you," Tomasz replied. "You showed me that life is worth fighting for," she said. "That hope can change everything. And you showed me that courage can inspire others," he said. "Your determination is stronger than any pain, stronger than any doubt." They stood together, looking at the horizon. The desert stretched endlessly, but now it felt less intimidating. It was a place of challenge, yes, but also a place where life could rise again. The villagers watched from a distance, seeing the bond between human and alien, the story of survival and hope made real. They would carry the lesson forward, teaching future generations that even when the world seems cruel and impossible, courage, determination, and hope can triumph over despair. As night fell, the stars twinkled above, and Nira felt a quiet peace. She had survived, she had risen, and she had learned the greatest lesson of all: life was precious, hope was powerful, and even in the face of impossible odds, one could rise again. Tomasz placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have done more than survive. You have inspired a village, and perhaps one day, a world." Nira smiled, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. "Then our story continues," she said. "Not as a tale of despair, but as a story of hope." And in the quiet desert night, surrounded by the village that had witnessed her journey, Nira understood that she had been given more than life. She had been given a chance to teach others that courage, persistence, and belief could overcome even the greatest obstacles. For Tomasz, she was a reminder that humans could change lives through determination and care. For the villagers, she was a living lesson that the impossible could become reality when one refused to give up. And for Nira herself, she was no longer broken. She was walking, standing, alive, and filled with hope for the future. The desert night carried the story of her survival across the sands. It was a story that would be told again and again. A story of courage, of human kindness, and of the strength that exists in all who refuse to surrender.